All right, looks like just about everyone is with us right on time, so thank you all for being prompt. I want to welcome you to today's webinar titled 4 Things You Should Know When Considering Co-Sourcing. For those of you that have attended Incept workshops in the past, this webinar is a little bit different, so I want to take just a second to set it up properly. I am routinely asked by blood center executives across the country why they should outsource or when they should outsource. And while my typical focus for webinar content is around growing skills as they relate to your tele-recruitment, today we're going to take it back to the very beginning and we're going to talk about simply the consideration of outsourcing or partnerships. So while most of my content will be directly tied to tele-recruitment, keep in mind the principles that we discussed today can be applied to anything that you choose to employ the use of an outside agency on. Things like IT or testing or payroll or digital marketing. So keep that in mind as we get started. A couple of housekeeping items. If you don't have your phone on mute, please do so other attendees don't hear you typing. But also don't hesitate to ask questions in the right-hand side of your corner, right-hand side of your screen. We can answer questions as we go throughout the presentation, and I will leave some time for questions at the end as well. So for those of you that are joining us for the very first time, let me say welcome, and if you're not familiar with Incept, tell you a little bit about who we are. Incept is a conversational marketing firm, and we specialize in developing and strengthening relationships with your current and potential donors on your behalf. What does that mean to you? For all intents and purposes, it means that in all forms of conversation, from talking to texting and chat to direct mail, we value the conversation with your donor, and our ultimate goal in each interaction is to ensure that your relationship with the donor is stronger after we interact with them than it was prior to our conversation. So pretty simple, but we take it pretty seriously. To give you some insight on why we are qualified to talk to you on the subject of donor recruitment, we have generated more than 4 million donations for more than 40 blood centers since helping our first local blood center in 1999. Our cost structure is designed to take the risk away from blood centers since you only pay for a productive unit that has been contacted by Incept. As you can tell from my description earlier, we are obsessed with the donor relationship. We genuinely love donors as much as our blood center clients do. As a matter of fact, just a quick story sidebar, we're located in Canton, Ohio, and this past Friday I received an email from an 80-year-old blood donor out of Houston, Texas. He is coming to vacation in Ohio and called our main number and asked if he could set up a time to visit with us because he feels such a connection with our team, having called him for a number of years to schedule appointments and get to know him, that he wants to stop and say hi while he's in the area. So just like your internal team, we develop those same lasting relationships, and it's what we strive for in every call. Most importantly right now, we are spending a ton of time exploring generational differences with donors and are finding that the younger audiences need a wide variety of communication avenues. And our focus is really on diversifying our offerings so that we can allow our blood center clients to be everywhere. As I mentioned earlier, if segments want to text, there needs to be data that tells us that, and that needs to be integrated with calling so that you're not calling and texting at the same time. Same with direct mail or chat. It's imperative that you offer all of these communication channels, but you need to use the data intelligence to your advantage to drive down costs and enhance the donor experience, and that's exactly what we're striving to do. So I'm going to go back a few years and tell you a little bit about our history. We were founded in 1993 by 2 brothers who saw a need for higher skill sets in call centers and centers who focus on integrity and relationships. Right now, we have nearly 300 employees devoted to blood donor recruitment, all the way from IT staff to conversational marketing experts, which are what we call the equivalent of what you might call an agent or a caller, CME that is dedicated to blood donor recruitment, and we're tipping 300 at this time. Each year, we make roughly 6.5 million phone calls to donors across the country, and these are actual conversations, not just dials. And as I mentioned, we've worked with more than 40 independent blood centers and the American Red Cross since starting in the industry in 1999. Just to tell you a little bit about some of our accomplishments, each year we're recognized in the industry for some of our efforts. PACE is an industry regulatory agency, and we're proud to be among their top 50 teleservices agencies. The award I'm most proud of is the Plain Dealer Top Workplace Award, which we have won for 5 years now. Each year the Plain Dealer does a blind survey to 100% of our employees, and they ask them what it's really like to work for Incept, and we're thrilled that our employees have voted us as an exceptional employer and workplace year after year. The bottom 3 awards here are all growth-based. As blood centers continue to look for ways to drive down cost and focus on their core business, we're proud to say that they've turned to us for assistance, and that has resulted in steady growth over the last few years. So enough about Incept. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I have been here with Incept for 20 years. Although technically I am a contact center executive, I really see myself as more of a blood banker. My sole focus has been on increasing blood donations for our clients since 1999. Looking at where blood centers want to go and helping them analyze their goals and their donor base and develop a strategy necessary to get them there is my true passion. Outside of work, I'm married with 2 amazing boys. I love to travel and listen to live music. And the picture here on the right-hand side is me and some friends in Loutraki, Greece, where we are headed back in just a few weeks. Now you have a decent understanding of who Incept is and who I am. Let's talk about co-sourcing. My choice of words here is very deliberately. So you may be asking, what is co-sourcing, or what is the difference? Co-sourcing is based on a long-term relationship, and it emphasizes values traditionally associated with partnering rather than vending. So co-sourcing allows you to maintain control. It should use your established standards and methodologies, and the relationship should encourage alignment and accountability for all of your KPIs and your goals, with the focus being on adding value. Sounds a little elementary, I know, but I'm going to flip it over and touch on the reverse of that, or the outsourcing portion, and draw some parallels. Outsourcing is more like replacing. So you don't necessarily get a dedicated team. Most of your gains are realized by following the vendor's rules and processes and procedures, and there's usually nominal alignment with goals and objectives. I'll give you a relatable example. If you were to outsource your payroll, would you ever expect your payroll company to come to you and ask, what are your goals and objectives as they relate to payroll? Do you want to pay your employees? Do you want to have their checks delivered by a certain time? Or is it more like they come to you and they say, we deliver checks at 10 a.m. On this day or that day? While it's an elementary explanation, I think it's the line between co-sourcing and outsourcing can be fuzzy. So it's a parallel that I wanted to draw, because co-sourcing, that partner would come to you and find out what your goals and objectives are. And with outsourcing, they kind of dictate a little bit more of that. At the very beginning, I told you that blood bank executives often ask me when they should consider outsourcing their tele-recruitment. Based on the example that I just gave you, my simple answer is never. Your donor base and your relationships with your donors is literally the lifeblood of your organization, and I don't mean that to be a pun. Sending your donor base out to a vendor and saying, do what you can, it's only going to be effective for so long. At some point, you will encounter file degradation that's going to reduce the size of your donor base, and the misalignment of goals is going to result in unstable inventory and increased costs. So let's ask the right question. When should I consider co-sourcing my tele-recruitment? For every blood center, the right time to co-source is different. Some centers have in-house staff that's able to handle recruitment, and they may just need outside help to convert whole blood donors over to automated donors. Or you may need help reactivating lapsed and superlapsed donors. There could be a time when you and your current employees are unable to manage the day-to-day recruitment of your donors and grow your collections to the level that you need to. These may be signs that it's time to consider co-sourcing. In any event, I believe that needs change from year to year. All of us that have been in blood banking for more than a year know exactly how fast it's changing right now. So revisit your plan regularly. If that's annually, great. If it's every 6 months, so be it. But your needs change. As the title of the webinar suggests, I want to give you 4 indicators that it's time to co-source your tele-recruitment. A common misconception about co-sourcing is that the primary goal is to reduce operational costs. While co-sourcing does frequently reduce spending, there are often some more important and more strategic benefits to be realized, and we're going to touch on those. The first is directly related to performance. So ask yourself, will co-sourcing improve the performance of my center? First, look at tele-recruitment, directly at your tele-recruitment, and compare the results between your internal team and prospective partners and identify if literally performance will increase. If your partner can produce more units using fewer donor records, adding fewer phone numbers to your do not call lists, and increasing your donor satisfaction scores, I would call those an indication of performance gains. The right partner will do more than just help tele-recruitment though. So those direct one-on-one correlations are great, but let's look beyond and outside of tele-recruitment. Look at the relationship between tele-recruitment and your mobile staff, or your collections team, or even your executive and leadership staff. Tele-recruitment should reduce time and frustration of the mobile team. You want a partnership with the collections staff because really we need to work in conjunction with the collections staff to get the right product. And the executive leadership team should play a very active role in goal setting and alignment. If your internal staff doesn't have a seat at your table and they aren't fostering great relationships with your frontline staff, they aren't improving the performance of your center. In fact, they could be hurting performance. Another direct correlation to performance is the scientific and analytics that need to be effectively managed within tele-recruitment. So ask yourself, does your team use data to examine the behaviors of your donor base? Are they establishing proper call frequency times based on a donor's likeliness to donate? Or do they use anecdotal feedback? I hear a lot of times like, this one donor told me, or I heard this, but we're not statistically using, there's so much data in our donor bases, we need to use that data to our advantage. At what frequency are they leaving messages on a donor's phone, whether it be answering machines or voicemails? While these may seem relatively unimportant, we've found that adhering to proper business rules can really increase both your front-end response rates and can cause large increases in your back-end show rates, not to mention decreasing do-not calls. So anecdotal feedback in a call center can be detrimental because most people only hear the negative or the complaints. We need to look at all of the data. Make sure your internal team is using data to make performance increasing decisions or partner with someone that can help you. Next is really around innovation. Is your contact center internally able to offer innovative ideas to further your marketing efforts without adding a ton of expenses or additional labor? We talked earlier about generational differences. Your marketing team may be looking at email trends or radio ads, etc., but your tele-recruitment team should be telling you about changes in donor behavior. Are fewer donors answering the phone? Why? What's the plan to change it? What about calling them? And if you don't reach them, leave a message and ask them to text you back instead of calling. That's how our younger donors are communicating, right? Well, if you aren't getting game-changing innovation coming from your in-house team, they may be doing what they've always done in the hopes of a different outcome, or their solution to more may just be get bigger. They may say, well, we can no longer hit goal, we need to hire more. That's not always the case. Our donors are changing rapidly, and we need to change with them, and the only way to stay in front of it is through innovation. Next, let's talk about technology. We touch on technology a couple of times throughout this presentation because it is so huge and needed, but such a limiter in a lot of blood centers. It's one of the weakest areas I see at small to mid-sized centers because while there may be an IT team, the resources aren't dedicated to the call center. They're usually tied up with running the business. So the tele-recruitment team doesn't often get to leverage their expertise in a way that can really drive performance and future calling. From database design to predictive modeling. We have done some studies and we found that 80% of your tele-recruitment units come from roughly 20% of your calling. So it's kind of the standard 80-20 rule, and I know it's a little cliche, but it's true. So knowing who isn't going to answer the phone, or knowing in advance the person that always says no and never comes in, you can actually reduce your calling and focus on willing donors to reduce resources and increase performance. But without ample IT resources, you're going to continue to call everyone in an effort to hit goal. Technology resources are really imperative to increasing performance. Next is really around core business. So does having an internal call center divert your resources and attention away from your core business? From human resources to training to IT and collections, your main mission is to ensure a safe and adequate blood supply for your hospitals. Dealing with HR issues, scheduling new hires or training classes to compensate for growth or attrition, interrupting IT from projects that they're working on so they can help with call lists and software problems in the call center, or even dealing with complaints from collections over what may have been said during a phone call, are all diversions that can be eliminated with the right partner and can improve your performance by letting you get back to your core business and getting out of the call center business. Performance gains are really critical when examining whether or not to co-source, because honestly, none of us are swimming in O's, so we can't afford to go backwards. But we still have 3 other things to consider. The next consideration or item on our list is whether or not you can gain essential skills that you don't currently employ. We've lightly touched on a couple of these, but I want to go into a little bit more detail. First is the technology side of things. So we talked a bit about the need for more IT support from your internal center. The right co-sourcing partner is going to help you with report writing, with call efficiency, with data mining, predictive modeling, and list segmentation beyond what you're getting from your in-house team or your CRM provider. Right now, your internal center looks at their internal results. With the full power of an extensive technology team, you should be looking at more than just tele-recruitment numbers. You should be seeing inventory integrated with calling so you know exactly what blood types are needed at what centers on which day of the week. You should know not to call the O-negative donor that you have tried 7 times, but the donor's never answered the phone. At some point, that donor is going to pick up the phone and ask that you stop calling, and then you'll lose him from your donor base. The right technology team will be mining through your database to give you a list of donors that always say yes and always schedule an appointment, but the last 15 times they've done so, they haven't shown up. That is just wasted time on the part of your contact center. So let's not call them and try something different. One thing you can try is within scripting. So if you're talking about the donor that you've called 15 times, they always say yes, they always schedule an appointment, but they never show up. Crafting the right message that says, Mr. Donor, I know we've scheduled you a few times and you've been unable to make it in. Let's work together to find a time that works with your schedule so we can get you in here to make a life-saving blood donation. It's a great way to acknowledge their behavior and increase the chances that the donor honors their commitment. But you can't do that unless you know the past behavior. In general, script writing is a science. There are very specific words you should use. There are very specific words you should stay away from. Length of script matters. If your team is not trained in proper script writing and you don't have the skills to teach them, you could have efficiency gains in partnering with someone who does have those skills. Next is regulation. I know each of you know all too well about FDA regulations. The question I pose today, though, is how well do you keep up on FCC and FTC regulations? Contact centers are heavily regulated by state and federal laws, and keeping up with the changes can sometimes be a near full-time job. So are you compliant? Yesterday, I believe it was, or day before yesterday, we received emails letting us know that there was a ban issued on calling in Louisiana due to the flooding, and it includes blood donor recruitment with some very specific exceptions. So I'm wondering if you heard about this. While it may not impact you directly, you may not be in Louisiana. My point is, did you even know? or would you have known if it were your state? I hate to think that our wonderful industry, where we are just trying to save lives, could come under scrutiny for our calling practices, but the truth is the legislation is already in place and we have to follow it. If we don't, we can face penalties and even litigation. So if you feel inadequate in the legislative area of operating an internal call center, it may be time for you to consider co-sourcing. As with the regulation from the FCC and FTC, we also have internal QA departments. Call center QA is very different from what you're used to, I'm sure, but it is about quality control of phone calls. So do you have a QA process in your contact center? Proper QA requires digital recording of all phone calls. It means trained professionals listening to, grading, and scoring phone calls. It means one-on-one coaching with your agents to improve performance. It means a lot more than just having a supervisor. It is by definition a dedication to excellence. So if your call center has a supervisor and you say, yes, our supervisor Y Jackson listens to calls, that is not a formal QA process. If you liken it to your internal QA, I'm sure you would see the glaring differences. QA is an essential part of performance. We have touched a couple of times on generational differences and the need to communicate with your donors the way that they want to be communicated with. But this is so very critical that I really wanted to put it in here as a dedicated slide so we could spend some time on it. You need to have 15 to 20 different choices in communication for your donors if you're going to bridge the generational gap and appeal to your entire donor base. Your baby boomers might still be answering their phone. I hope they are, and if they are, that's great. I hope they're coming in to donate. But other segments of your donor base are looking for you to be advertising on Pandora. They want to see Instagram posts. They want to see Facebook ads. They need Snapchat stories. They want to chat on your website. And they want to text to schedule or cancel an appointment. They speak with their thumbs. In short, you need to be everywhere that they are. And if you don't have those skills internally, if there's no one there that can tell you what KIC is and how you can apply KIC to your business, it may be time to look into a co-sourcing partner that can help. Moving on to our third consideration. Our third consideration is specific to the service that you're providing to your donors and your hospital customers. Specifically, can it be elevated by co-sourcing? Looking out 2 to 3 years, ask yourself if you're planning for growth. What would you do if you learned that tomorrow you gained a large hospital system that needs you to flex and increase your inventory by 15% starting immediately? What is the stress that puts on your center? Can you hire that fast? Do you have to get temps? I mean, temps, they call off, they're not as committed to our cause, they have higher turnover, we pay a markup. But when you don't have a choice and you just need a body, there aren't many other options. Well, you do have another option. Plan for success. Partner with a center that you can leverage when you need to flex. For the last 17 years, I have viewed blood donor recruitment on the customer service spectrum of skill sets. So when you look at hiring in your internal contact center, you tend to look for folks with high customer service skills. As our industry changes, we are seeing that requirement is changing. Today, we need to be hiring and empowering sales-trained individuals to convert our A donors to platelets, to move our ABs to plasma. Our call center staff and our collection staff, for that matter, need proper sales skills to provide the unique benefits to every donor about why they need them to try a new procedure to ensure the absolute best inventory mix for our community. If you don't have salespeople or a sales training program for your people, co-sourcing may be a consideration for you for those areas. Earlier I talked about QA and I referenced digital recording or recording of phone calls. To make sure you are giving your donors and your hospitals the best possible experience, You need to be able to go back to a phone call and listen to it and determine exactly what happened in the event of a complaint. You need the recording to make sure you can listen and coach your staff to be better. You need to be able to share real examples of what to do and what not to do. And in the event of an unfortunate donor complaint, you need to be able to pull that recording and find out exactly what happened. And if there's a systemic problem, how do you fix it? And if it's a miscommunication or misinterpretation, you need to fix that too. But our donors are too important, and we don't have an abundance of them. So we have to have processes in place to protect our donor base, and digital recording is one of those areas. Oftentimes, our problem is simple, and it's bandwidth that is needed to make sure we're getting our hospitals what they need. So when you're looking at your call through or what your agents are calling, can they call 100% of your current donors each day? Can they call all of your lapsed and super lapsed donors every single day? Selectively digging into your older donor segments is the key to increasing the percentage of right type inventory that you have on hand. Maximizing older segments by blood type can be a huge competitive advantage if you can get your own egg levels at 13% or even 15%. But to do this, you need the bandwidth, and the team needs the sales skills to explain to a donor that hasn't been in since 2001 on just why we need them to come back. So technology is still a large motivator to co-source, but specifically when you're looking to offer a higher level of service, a predictive dialer can have a significant increase on your efficiency. If your team is manually dialing, you would likely be able to provide a much higher level of service to your donors and customers having a predictive dialer. If you don't have one, there may be segments of your donor base that would benefit from co-sourcing with someone who does. We're moving through pretty quickly here. We are on to our fourth consideration, but it's a little bit of a hefty one. I intentionally left the most obvious one for last, and that is cost savings. I left it for last because you need to make sure that your decision encompasses getting better and saving money. So I didn't want to see the I didn't want anyone to see the cost calculator at the beginning and jump off the webinar saying they've got the keys to the kingdom. Hopefully I've given you a lot of other items to think about as well, but let's talk about what it truly means to save costs when co-sourcing. You need to ask yourself a few questions first. Number one, can I move fixed costs to variable costs? Do I qualify for any group discounts through a GPO or even volume discounts due to the sheer size of my organization? And lastly, how on earth do I figure out my internal cost per donor so I can compare apples to apples? First, let's talk about fixed costs. When you move your tele-recruitment costs to variable, you're going to begin your journey on being a hero in the eyes of your CFO. But if you can do that and save money, you're well on your way to superhero status and making strategic decisions that will have a positive impact on your center for years to come. The only way to know for sure, though, is to figure out what your internal cost per donor is so that you can do that comparison. So let's look at just how to do that. It's pretty intense. And we are recording the webinar, and we'll send this out so you all have the list. So try not to take a lot of notes, just to kind of take it all in. There are a lot of things to factor in to truly determine your costs. First are very direct costs, and these are the ones that are obvious. Labor or wages, insurance, 401k, bonus. If you do use temps, factor in your markup and the increase in turnover. Indirectly, you have supervisory staff, there's admin time. With temps, there's often a significant learning curve before you realize their maximum potential, and you need to account for that ramp time. You have training costs, you have ads that you have to run to get new hires, whether you're doing that in the local newspaper or whether you're online and doing that with your local newspaper and services such as Indeed. The temp group often uses a portion of your human resources time. Your call center in general is going to take up human resources time. You need a quality control system. As we talked about, you often dip into your IT staff's time. So figuring out your direct and indirect costs isn't easy, but this list should help you begin to put some numbers to it and really start to figure out, based on what they're responsible for driving in, how much is that costing you, and you can do the math to see exactly what the cost per unit is. Now, once you have your direct and indirect costs, so you're not done. We have non-labor related costs, so things like office space, your phone system, software purchases, utilities, computers, desks and chairs, cubicles, even licenses for various software that the team may use may be an area where you're spending money that you don't necessarily have to. Some of these costs can be completely eliminated with co-sourcing, some can be reduced, and some may be repurposed to a different department. Space is typically one that I hear about, like, well, we're not going to get rid of that space so we won't save any money. You likely will not lose that cost, but if you look at each department as its own profit center, that portion of your rent can be reallocated elsewhere and out of your budget. So it's an important one to consider. As always, there are miscellaneous items, things like variance and admin time, incentives. If your contact center is running, like most call centers, they're constantly asking for money to do potlucks or give away gift cards or incentives to get people to work extra hours or things like that. So you want to make sure you take those into consideration. In a call center, variance is literally a silent destroyer. If you are paying one of your agents for 40 hours worth of work, but they're only spending 20 hours of time on the phone, you're going to struggle to hit your projections. You're going to pay for non-productive work time where they're not generating units. And trust me when I say your staff will find more and more excuses to remain off the phones. A quick exercise after this webinar, pull a payroll report and pull a phone time report and compare them. The difference should be under 10%, meaning 90% of the time you are paying your staff, they should be on the phones and generating units. Turnover, new hires, and then the time waiting for a new hire to get up to speed all have financial implications that you need to consider. And lastly, inefficiencies in your support system. Be diligent, know what you're looking for, and make sure you're getting the most out of your support system. If you truly spend some time and dive into this list, you can get to a fully baked cost per unit. Once you know that cost per unit, you can then compare it to see if co-sourcing can truly save your organization money. This is kind of the point where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, on cost savings. Finding a partner that only charges per productive unit moves your fixed cost to a variable cost. It eliminates risk, and it gives you the ability to flex as your need for units increases and decreases. Co-sourcing is going to allow you to reduce your headcount without sacrificing units. And while that is a really uncomfortable topic to talk about, I speak to centers daily that are faced with staff reductions, but they're still being held accountable to hit the number of units needed. So when you need to produce, but yet you need to reduce headcount, co-sourcing could be an option. The right partner aligns with your goals. They make your goals their goals, and they're going to exhaust all efforts to ensure your success. If you are still with me and this is not too overwhelming, I hope it's all making sense and causing you to think just a little bit differently. We're getting towards the end, so if you can take a deep breath. I'm going to recap a little bit. I hope now you're asking yourself kind of, what does all of this mean? I challenge you to review your notes and see if you now have a good place to start figuring out whether or not you should investigate co-sourcing. If you think now's the time to examine that, I'll give you some tips on how to get started. The first thing you want to do is do a self-assessment. Really figure out what you and your team are good at and where are your gaps. The right partner is going to complement your strengths, and they're going to fill your gaps. They will sit beside you when developing a strategic plan. They are going to be with you every step of the way when reaching for your goals. When you're looking to grow your platelet inventory and increase the percentage of own eggs on your shelf, the right partner is going to be there. They're also going to provide you with legislative guidance and innovative ideas in place of phone calls. But most of all, the right partner is going to challenge you to be better and achieve more. So now that you have all of this information, If you do look to get started, I have some words of wisdom or some words of advice for you. Begin small. You do not have to begin large or full scale. Take it easy. Co-sourcing doesn't have to be all or nothing. Honestly, it shouldn't be all or nothing. So start by finding a partner to call your own eggs super lapsed donors. These are donors that haven't been in 5 to 20 years, but we know their own eggs, so every reactivation is invaluable. The key here is to develop a relationship with your partner. Starting small is going to allow you to evaluate strengths and build a relationship. Next, go on site, visit your partner. If you're considering more than one, visit all of them. Trust me, this is money well spent to see the operation that you are entrusting your donor base to. Once you have a partner in place, listen to the digitally recorded calls often. Ask for weekly status update calls. Ask for trends. What is the right partner should be calling from multiple blood centers and should be able to give you industry insight on what is happening across the nation. Many of you might be experiencing a dip right now in your show rate. Do you know why? If you walked into your contact center, would they be able to tell you why show rate's down? The right partner would be able to tell you that during reminder calling and no-show calling, they're hearing a lot of back-to-school activity and people are rescheduling. Normally reschedules are at a 50% rate, now they're at a 75% rate, and it's really impacting our ability to get donors in. In addition to that, they should be able to tell you what they're going to do about it and how they're going to combat that low show rate. You shouldn't have to accept that that's just the way it is. There needs to be a plan in place. What other levers can you pull to get in more donors to make sure you have the inventory on hand to meet your hospital needs? Also, take the time to get to know the leadership team of your partner. There's a lot of experience to be gained there and synergy and networking to ensure you're hitting your goals and you can revisit your strategy with people that know strategy in the call center world. Lastly, revise your strategy regularly. As quickly as our donor base makeup is changing, so should our strategy. It was just a few years ago, our goal was to call as many donors as we could possibly call and get as much blood as we could possibly get. Then there was a huge shift and a decrease, and now we're getting really scientific about the blood types that we're calling and what procedure we're asking those donors for, and how do we move those whole blood donors over to automation to make sure that we're getting a double red cell from these donors, but getting a platelet or a plasma from those donors. It is going to continue to evolve and change as price pressures put on us. We have to get more efficient, and our contact center makes up such a huge portion of our recruited units that we need to get that science from within that team. By now, you are either bursting with ideas or drowning with questions. And I know webinars aren't traditionally a place that is conducive to asking a lot of questions. Feel free to type them in. But also feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm going to wind up now, but I'm genuinely interested in helping each of you make the best possible decisions you can that are right for your center. So I've got my email address on screen, and I do appreciate each of you taking the time out of your day to join me. I hope these 4 considerations have been helpful and will lead you in a new strategic direction as it relates to your contact center. As always, I'm here to help. Don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you all so much for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Have a great day.